Welcome back to a very special episode of Global Card Collectors. Today we have on Chris McGill, who I think, if you listen to any content, you can find him on Jeremy Lee Live now every week on Sunday. So you can hear him in a couple days. But, he's the co-founder of Card Ladder. One of the early content creators, I guess. I've never watched House of Jordans, but I know you did that in the past. And now he hosts the crossover podcast. Definitely, I listen every week. It's actually good in Istanbul. I get up, it hits 7 a.m. here, and the kids are still asleep. So it's like the one live thing I do. Sometimes I'm on live with that. But anyway, Chris, thanks so much for jumping on with us today. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Pleasure to be here. We were talking just a little bit before the show started about how I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing with Global Card Collectors and the approach that you're taking, and it's an honor to be here.
Right on. Will, you're also with us here.
Right, that's right. Yeah, very
So
excited to be here. I pretty much when John told me that he had arranged this interview, I'm like, man, can I just sit in? I just kind of want to be a fly on the wall, and I'm probably going to be fanboying in the background.
Yeah, we're big fans. We were telling Chris before. So yeah, man, great to have you here. And understand you just kind of are relocating from Dallas, even though we have all the Dallas swag is it in the back?
We do, yes.
How's the move
Yeah,
going?
yeah. Well, I've moved a lot of times in my adult life. Probably about a dozen, maybe or so. Like every year or two, or three, I've had a different reason to go to a different city, whether it was for school or work or whatever it was. And Christina and I spent a nice 2.5 years in Dallas, and got to sort of follow an interesting chapter of Luka's career, what turned out to be the last chapter of his Dallas career, which was we didn't get to go all the way and win the championship with the Mavericks last year, but we got to go and watch them compete in the finals and got 2 home games in the finals out of it and got to see them win one of those two, which was great. So we had a nice stay in Dallas, but yeah, now we had a good run there. And now we're just moving back to the area where I grew up in, which is a nice area for the hobby. The next 3 years of the National Sports Collectors Convention are in Chicago, well, technically in Rosemont, and the new home that we're moving to, is a little less than an hour away from that venue. That venue also hosts the Chicago Spectacular Sports Card Show, so I'm pretty excited to be in driving distance once again of some of the bigger events that the hobby has every year.
That's exciting. Big changes in your life. Moving house, and of course, Luka. We'll get into that a bit more. Making a big move. So you're back in Chicago. Are you, maybe thinking about maybe a new PC, maybe some Matas Buzelis?
Buzelis was pretty hyped up coming into this year on local media, Chicago media. And he also has that cocky personality.
Yeah.
But then he wasn't getting much playing time. And I just sort of forgot about him a little bit. And now that Levine is out of there, and he's getting a little more action, a little more playing time, and he's making some good use of it. But I just don't know if there's anything there yet. I mean, if he turns out to be even a quality role player in the NBA, that's a great accomplishment as an athlete. But as a player to collect, I haven't seen enough yet to wet my whistle.
I mean, I'm a fantasy junkie, and I can tell you, like, it's kind of how I found out about Jokic. You just see the stats, and Buzelis is starting to pop on the stats. I'll just say that.
Really?
Like, he's
Oh,
he's
okay.
he's intrigued me. Like, I'm definitely going to keep him on my draft radar for next year.
That's great. I mean, he's very athletic too. He's a unique player, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he turns into.
Good deal. So you intimated or told, I guess, that you grew up in the Chicago area. And I think most people who know you know this about you, but you, of course, started as a Jordan collector, which is pretty awesome. I don't know anyone who collects basketball cards that wouldn't want a Jordan card. Yeah, just talk us through, to introduce yourself kind of as a collector. I know you started with Jordan. When did it start? And, I mean, now you've been in the hobby, we're in 2025. How has it evolved along the way?
Yeah. I suppose very briefly, if we really go back to when I started, which was when I was a kid, I started collecting kind of as a byproduct of going to garage sales with my mom when I was like 7, 8, 9 years old. And that just happened to coincide with the 93, 94 NBA season. That was really my first year of collecting cards. And Michael Jordan had retired prior to that season. And I adopted Hakeem Olajuwon as my favorite player. And then Chris Webber was my favorite player in that rookie draft class. So those were the two guys whose cards I had a lot of when I went back and rediscovered my old collection in adulthood. There was a lot of Hakeem stuff in there, like Chris Webber. I had the Chris Webber Power in the Key. I had it in a screw down case. It was completely worn too because I would always take it out and look at it and then put it back in. But I started there. And then, as I continued to collect as a kid, and Michael Jordan came back and had another three-peat, and plus being from the Chicago area, when you would go to local shows here or go to card shops here, it was just Michael Jordan cards. I mean, it was probably that way in most areas, but I probably had the most Michael Jordan cards of any when I went back and looked at my old collection. Uh, so that's kind of how Jordan got started. But then I took a break from collecting. I mean, I collected, probably up until like 97 or 98. And then I just completely forgot about it for about 2 decades. And then I came back to collecting right around the time when I was 29 or 30, which would have been 2016. And I was supposed to be studying for the bar exam. I took like a gap year because I went back to college late. That's a whole different story. I was a non-traditional student, but after I finished undergrad, I took a gap year to study for the admissions exam for law school. And but I just got so distracted by collecting cards. I just never. I gave myself too much free time to just focus on the LSAT, and I just started collecting cards. And then when I came back that time, I just decided once again I dipped my toe into a lot of different athletes. I tried Hakeem, I tried Kobe, I tried lots of different players, but the player who just I gravitated to was Michael Jordan, partially because of my tie to him, but also just because I felt that he was uh, the best player ever, and I really wanted to collect that too. And there was a really strong community around him and his cards. So if you went to the blowout forums or you went on social media, you could always find a community of people who were talking about his cards and collecting his cards. And I wanted that too. So that's kind of how I got landed back on MJ, even when I came back.
Yeah, and that bullpen, I think that you're talking about in LA, right?
Well, eventually I would be back in LA. In 2016, I was back here in the Chicago area for a year, but then yeah, I ended up going to law school in Southern California the next year,
Okay.
and yeah, Bullpen became our local card shop.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's well, yeah, LA I think it's interesting you mentioned Hakeem. I mean, when I think of kind of international players, I think Jordan and Kobe for sure, just like the world loves those players, loved still. And I think Hakeem also was kind of a one of the first international guys. But then, now you kind of jump back in and you first started collecting two pretty sweet international players. So I'm thinking you maybe have a thing for something, a player that's international or something. But you now are, I think known best as a Jokic collector, maybe. But you're also a Luka collector. I know you started that way. So do you think you're kind of drawn to, I don't know, international players more, or not more, but just there's something else there?
Yeah, maybe there's something about international players. They have maybe a special challenge they have to overcome, the cultural challenge that sort of filters out the good players who aren't great, and then you just sort of get left with the cream of the crop, who are the international players who are able to succeed here. because I think there's a lot of players, say in the Euro League, maybe guys like Mirotic, who could be NBA players if they wanted to, but there's maybe a mismatch culturally, or they just prefer to spend the prime years of adulthood in their native communities and around their families, which I can completely understand that too. It sort of takes a sicko to leave everything behind and go to this other place halfway across the world just to pursue your profession. But I can relate to that a little bit because I've done a bit of that in my life too.
I was gonna say, man, we moved halfway across the world for a woman, so we're real sickos.
Well, so that's maybe the thing that we do relate with these international players with on some level is
Mhm.
that we've relocated and upended our lives for something we're passionate about,
Yeah.
and maybe that's something we all have in common with them. But the real answer though is that I think it's just coincidence, John. Honestly, I do. I think it's more so that Hakeem just so happened to be the best player when I was collecting as a kid, especially during those first few years when Jordan was retired and the Rockets won back-to-back championships and Hakeem was league MVP and defensive player of the year. And I just I really always admired post play, and he had some of the best footwork that we've ever seen. So I think that it was just more of a coincidence that Hakeem happened to be this very graceful player who's dominating the league when I first started collecting. And then when it came to Luka, it was also just a bit of a coincidence too. So I'd been collecting for back in the hobby for 2 or 3 years when his rookie season came out, and then Christina and I were on a road trip during a winter break when 2018 Prism Basketball came out, and we always stop at hobby shops during road trips, and that was the cool basketball product to buy. So we bought it, and at one of the hobby shops that we stopped at during that winter break, it was actually Dave and Adam's storefront in upstate New York, and we bought a few hobby boxes. And remember, hobby boxes then were 200, $250. And we bought a few of them, and a Luka Prism Orange out of 49 came out of one of those boxes. And then that's really what started us collecting Luka. Was he was the exciting rookie from that class. We pulled the biggest card we'd ever pulled. We wanted to keep it, and all of a sudden I was like, I have an incentive to watch Luka and see if he's any good. And so I purchased League Pass, and I started watching all the Mavericks games, and then I got hooked, and I said he is good, and I want to start a collection of him. And then from there, while I was really getting into collecting Luka, I also really started getting into the NBA, the active NBA, the current NBA, and I went down lots of rabbit holes. I went down the advanced stats rabbit holes, discovered basketball references, advanced stats, discovered Nate Silver's 538 Raptor, which no longer exists, but that was a really cool basketball stat website. And while I was watching Luka climb these charts and solidify himself as a top five player, I kept seeing a different name that was at the top of every list. And at first, I didn't really know what it meant. I was still learning what these statistics were measuring, and I just kind of ignored it. But 1 year goes by, 2 years go by, and we're talking right now the 2020 season, the 2021 season, right at the beginning of MVP Jokic. And after he won his first MVP, and I was like, I've seen this guy at the top of every list for 2 or 3 years now, and it seems like the NBA media values these rankings. And when I look at the historical context of these lists, and I see that his name is showing up and his best seasons are starting to show up right next to, Giannis's great seasons that he was rattling off, and Kareem's great seasons, Wilt Chamberlain, LeBron, MJ, and his seasons are right there with those on these metrics. I said, maybe there's something to this. And then about halfway through his second MVP season, we obviously didn't know he was going to win MVP yet, but his numbers were even improved upon from prior seasons. I decided I gave in. I said, I've invested all this time into understanding what these metrics mean and following Luka's rise in these metrics. But here's this other guy who just seems to kind of fly under the radar, even as a league MVP, and he's at the top of all these lists. I need to start watching this guy. I want to start collecting this guy. And so I want to start rooting for this guy. And so I picked up a few of his cards, and that's the incentive. That gets me that gives me the real motivation to like start watching him play. And then I did, and before you know it, I'm all in on collecting this guy. And then it's been an amazing journey since I started collecting him. He got his second MVP, and then he got robbed of his third, but
Oh yeah.
went on to win a championship anyway. So it's been a lot of fun. That's kind of how that unfolded. So my answer, John, is just that I just think it's more coincidence or a happenstance that I've gravitated to these international players. It just kind of worked out that way.
Yeah, you are describing serendipity, but it also came out of your life, and your data mining and
It did.
yeah, I mean, it is the 90s were kind of a special time too, I think, with those players and just the international attention after the 92 Olympics. It was just, it was the American peak in the 90s and all this stuff. So it was just, a special time in that regard. And yeah, so where was I going to go with this? Um, I guess have you thought about I mean, would you say you've always been a player collector? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, like since the 90s then.
Yes. Yes. I've
That's
always
rare. That's rare, I
Yeah,
think.
what do you think about that? Do you think there are more team collectors and sort of, but you have to collect a player on some level, right? Because the cards typically just depict one player, but a team collector will only focus on the players from their favorite team. Do you think there's more of that, or do you think there's more people who will follow their player no matter where they go?
Gosh, maybe in cards it is more the player. I don't know. I'm new to player fandom, kind of only in the last 10 years or so. So I don't know. Yeah. Will, what do you think?
Oh, it's a tricky one. Maybe because are Americans more inclined to support their local teams, like John with his beloved Sacramento Kings? Uh, but it seems like Chris, you're not really a Bulls guy, I assume. You're
I'm really
not going to be a
not.
Mavs guy anymore, it seems.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm really not. Like there is like a structure set up. The way the league works is they need local fans.
Mhm.
So a big part of the NBA's revenue is driven by concessions and ticket sales at the local arena. So the Dallas Mavericks need 20,000 people from Dallas to attend every game. They need that revenue. Like the whole league sort of functions on that. So maybe there's a business model in the future where things are more like they were in the bubble, and you don't need to play in front of 20,000 fans, and people can be um, more transient with who they support. But right now, all the leagues need that structure. So it's a little bit weird. It's definitely unusual, I think, to just follow players from one destination to another, but it's more doable now. Maybe 20 or 30 years ago, you would have games that come on national TV. You'd have a few different teams that would get a national game every week. Otherwise, you were really restricted to just watching whatever team appeared on the regional sports network that
True.
broadcast to your area. So player collecting, even the possibility of following the career of a player, that's a pretty new phenomenon. That's maybe about 10-ish years old. Or, it goes back to maybe the advent of League Pass.
I think League Pass is a big piece. I think it's a
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah, I mean, mine was born out of just futility of rooting for the Kings, from like the 2000s onwards. So just like I love basketball, I love the NBA, but I gotta root for something here.
Yeah, and the other thing about team collecting is that you usually have it in common with the people you went to school with and grew up with, and you have it in common with your family and your friends. It's just something that you have shared together. I think that motivates it too. So those of us who are transplants and move around a lot, we're not as committed to that. So it makes it a little easier. And also, there is something quite nice. There's also there is a double edged sword because when you like exercise your own personal agency to choose, and you pick a player or a team that isn't the one that you were born into regionally,
Right.
if they do well, that's great. You've chosen them. There's something,
That's right.
but if they don't do well, now you've really buried yourself because you're just sort of on a miserable island of despair. and there's nobody to despair with. You just sort of put yourself there. But I've always found that if I can, and like, look, I don't want to make it seem like I did anything remarkable by choosing Jokic. I looked at lists and he was number one on all of them, and I said, I bet it'll feel good to root for that guy, and I chose him. So there's something about that too that like it feels great to support a player who's great and who wins, and choosing sometimes can soften the pain of you know 25 years of Bulls misery and
I mean,
mismanagement.
it's like coming out of the Middle Ages into Enlightenment, right? I mean, this, let's take charge of our lives here.
Yeah, I like the
Exactly.
way that you put that, Chris. With myself, I guess being an international in general, what I remember growing up was people would choose players for their fame, but they'd also choose them based on the uniforms. This is not how I picked the Celtics as a team, actually, but a lot of New Zealanders will walk around with the Bird 33 Celtics uniform, and they'll wear the Jordan uniform because it's popular, or the Charlotte Hornets, and that would be fandom from an international perspective. But yeah, when a player would change teams, you could change uniforms with them too. I think New Zealanders obviously will always understand player passion because we have one NBA player. He's incredible. We love him, and so whatever team he plays for, we're rooting for him. So it's like, let's go, Steve. Come on, brother, you can do it.
Well,
So that's
he's on
kind
a pretty good
of
team
an
this year
element.
too. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, he's on and the Rockets are a really interesting team, Will, because they have a large Chinese fan base. They have a large international fan base from Yao Ming, and so I guess it's interesting. New Zealand is lining up behind Houston too now that
yeah,
they have Steven
and
Adams
Turkey, of course, in Turkey,
and
yeah,
and Turkey, and they're a good team. The Rockets are a really good team
great.
this year.
They're excellent actually, and I mean we double back to fantasy, and John saying he found Jokic through him just outperforming everyone in fantasy. And I picked up as a free agent Armin Thompson
Hmm.
as a fantasy player and started watching them and watching him and just like, wow, I really like this kid. I think I'm going to start holding on to the cards of his I had because I would join some breaks looking for some Schengen cards and be getting Armin Thompson going, oh, okay, he's not that great. Okay, we just put him to the side here. And when I started watching him this season, I'm like, wait, I think I've got a bunch of Thompson cards that I could pull out the bag and have a look at. So that seems to have come around well for me too.
He's a revelation.
Yeah,
Thompson is a revelation. Şengün is he's baby Jokic.
yeah, that's right.
So there's this young core building there that's pretty exciting. So are you more Şengün or Thompson right now as a
Oh,
collector?
it's
Oh,
so tough. It's a
good
tough question. Well, I
question.
mean, I have more Schengen cards because we saw him develop in Turkey. So we got to see him as a 17, 18-year-old playing against the top players in Europe and dominating. So when he went into the league, you know, like you said before, it's a little bit like, wow, here's a guy who I've picked from before, who I've scouted as a fan. So I'm a big Schengen fan, but Armin Thompson is really knocking on the door because he is just so much fun to watch too. He's so much fun to watch play basketball.
Yeah, he's intense. He
Yeah.
he threw Tyler Hero to the ground in that game earlier this year. I Tyler Hero is a real pest. So I can't really hold that against anybody. Just the intensity that he plays with, that's what
Yeah.
you love to see.
Yeah, that and then I don't know if you remember the Knicks game when he did that hezzy and then just came through and just dunked it in the lane. It's like, what is this? And Steven Adams has played with Russell Westbrook and a
Yeah,
couple of and Ja Morant, and he said that Armin Thompson is the best athlete he's ever played with. And I was just like, you are kidding me. So
yeah, that's high praise.
Steve.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I gave you a little homework. I don't know if you're ready for this, but and you did it again this week, by the way. Condolences on Mahomes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that was brutal.
Um, Chris is a Mahomes collector in football. So if you haven't watched Super Bowl, it was not good. Don't ask him about it, I guess. But you did it this
Says the
past week.
Purdy fan.
I heard
Says the
too.
Purdy fan.
The
Yes.
Purdy. Well, yeah, we share Purdy. I
I
like
like
that.
Purdy too. I do like
Yeah.
Purdy as well.
Yeah, I
Purdy's
mean,
the prospect and Mahomes is the solidified guy.
yeah, I mean you're definitely my number one voice because I mean I think you're, thoughtful, you're intellectual and you're kind, but it's also because you collect players I like, you know.
That's what it boils down to at the end of the day, John. I do think there is a type of us out there who sort of we look for the same indicators. We want to see guys who score really high on the metrics that really smart people developed, and I think that's probably going to be a pretty good um, heuristic if all else fails. Is like a guy like Purdy, okay, entering his fourth season. Purdy has the highest passer rating career in NFL history. Okay, so it's not like Purdy is like Purdy doesn't get the media fanfare. In fact, I think the media really does not like him. Uh, but that's a whole different topic. But it doesn't feel out of proportion to say I'm going to collect the guy who has the highest career passer rating in NFL history. That feels okay. I'm okay putting my chips on that guy.
I like it. I like it. Um, so you did you do this exercise on the PSA pod where they ask you to choose, and I heard this episode with Purdy and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, and really appreciated it. It made me look at those cards, and I liked the ones you chose. So I was going to ask you to do it for Luka and Jokic. So of two categories, one under $100 and one under $500 that you really like.
Yes, it's a great question. It's a fun exercise. For Luka and Jokic, I'm not looking to create competition for myself. So, not going to and these are ranges of cards that I collect too. Jokic cards under $500. There are some really good ones out there that I go after. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to sketch an approach rather than name specific cards
Right.
because quite literally these are cards that I'm trying to buy myself. So
Fair.
here's an
Totally.
approach instead. The approach is this, especially for Jokic. So I'll give an example of an under $500 card for Jokic that I've chosen to not go after, but that is available right now. It's one of his mid-career Don Russ Choice Black one of ones from the Don Russ base set. And this card has a little bit extra appeal to me because I have Jokic's Don Russ one of one rookie. So lining up other Don Russ one of ones from his career there's like an allure to sort of pairing those. But this one in particular is being sold by a consignment company that's based out of China that's pretty notorious for unpaid items. And this card has been relisted two or three times at auction. So I've just chosen to stay away from it. But it's exactly the type of card that I would look at. And it's ended right around $500, maybe a little bit less. And the formula that I use to like identify a card like this is I look for cards preferably from base sets, preferably if the player appears multiple times in the base set, preferably the first appearing card of the player in the base set. And I try to look for the one of one, and I get extra excited if there's only one of one of the player in that base set. Then we're really cooking. So Jokic has a few Donruss one of ones from that base set. I think he has two or maybe three. So it doesn't check that box, but it really does check all the others. And it's also a nice looking card. It's shiny and it's the Asia exclusive, being the choice parallel, which is kind of a neat extra bonus too.
Hmm.
So that's the type of card I would look at for Jokic. Is I try to find something. You're not going to find an optic one of one, like the gold vinyl or something. You're not going to find one of those of Jokic for under $500, but you can find a Don Russ one of one from a base set, or maybe a Flux one of one, or let me see. I actually Oh yeah, it's like or something like this. Like I don't know if this is going to come through the screen very well.
Cool, Recon.
This is Recon. Yeah, this is the 2021 Hollow Platinum one of one Jokic from Recon,
Sick.
and it's also the only one of one. And I think this was maybe $600 or something when I bought it, maybe a year or two ago. I mean, that's exactly what I would look for. And plus, it's a really beautiful looking card, and it's from a lesser desired brand, and it's going to sit right in that price range. So that's the type of card that I would look for Jokic. Luka's a little more expensive still. So for Luka, you might be restricted to inserts. Um, I actually have a Luka one here that might fit that bill. Yeah, this one actually has like a bit of a sentimental meaning to me. This is
Cool.
his 2019 Hoops Premium Stock NBA City one of one
Cool.
about Dallas. The Dallas is the NBA city, and this is an insert set, which are cheaper than the base set. And it's just it spoke to me, being that we moved to Dallas for a few years, basically to watch Luka play. So for the under 500 range, that's what I would look for. What do you guys look for if you're sticking in the 500 and under range?
Ooh. I mean, I just brought, I mean, this one I got for like 150. Um, I mean, and this is probably my favorite Luca card. I mean, this would be my runner up. I don't know. I like both of them. I mean, this is more common. This is a gold, again, 2019 Hoops Premium stock. As a Kings fan, it really works because Bogdanovich is on there.
Nice.
Um, so that, yeah, it's an insert, just as you said. So I like that approach. I mean, this has obvious meaning to me much more because we passed on Luca for Marvin Bagley. Lovely choice.
Yeah, for under $500. I picked this one up for probably about $2. But it's this one here. It's Luca's pre-rookie card. So this
Nice.
is actually a Turkish card. There's the back of it for you. And I just went online to it was like a marketplace, like Facebook Marketplace kind of thing. I was like, let's just get it because it's Luca in his Real Madrid uniform. But when these are graded by Bickett, they go up for about 2 grand. It's just like it's
Wow.
really cool. It's so different because he's a 16, 17-year-old kid. So this is before John's card is this one. And both now I'm looking for John to see if I can get him a copy too. So this is what speaks to us. It's like this Turkish connection because it's a Turkish Luka Doncic rookie card. So yeah, there's the I wanted to show off to you.
Yeah,
Very cool.
Luca has so many cool cards. I mean, Keith, a friend of the show, I mean, he's been finding stuff in like 24 product, 2024 product. I bet the one of that would be 500 is my guess. So yeah, if you're willing to put a lot of money out there, you could get a special card. I like that. Jokic, I don't know. I don't. I guess I don't look in those waters anymore. That sounds a little arrogant or something. I just have two cards that are worth more than that, and I'm not looking to add more. That's just where I am. So yeah, thanks for those insights on that. That very interesting from my
It's a really
perspective.
great approach, actually. I quite
Yeah.
like it. I like the way that you're thinking, man. It definitely gives me some more thought about like so if I am going to be getting more cards because when I got back into the hobby, I was just buying bulk. Like I bought lots of 14,000 cards and that kind of thing. And just over time, I think the kind of the nostalgia of like wanting cards at an age of 14 or 15 years old and not being able to get them as an adult, you buy bulk and then you're just like, what am I going to do with all these cards? I want less, but I want cards that just have a little bit more meaning to me. And so I think an approach like that is something that I'm going to strongly think about when I'm going to Germany to Dusseldorf to look for cards.
So Chris, I wanted to ask you kind of a philosophical question. You and Josh were bantering about or something as you do on the crossover. And you made the point about how collectors feel like they always know what they're talking about, right? And so, I mean, it's pretty obvious that comes from some place of ego, right? And, predominantly male hobby. The male ego is, the most fragile thing on the planet, probably. Um, do you think about ego and when you collect and, the role between that? Because it is like this whole process that you're trying to manage for yourself. Like, are we just kind of doomed to be in our own egos when we collect?
Great question. And I had to go rush and look up something to remember what it was called. Are you familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect?
Just maybe heard of it.
Same. I'm not super familiar with it, but it shows up sometimes on social media, and I always like take a screenshot of it because it's so amusing. The Dunning-Kruger effect, in particular, there's a graph that depicts it, and on the y-axis is confidence, and on the x-axis is knowledge. And the graph shows that this effect, basically, the way it works is you have the highest confidence in a domain when you know the least. That's when the graph is at its peak. And then as your knowledge increases, your confidence swiftly declines. And then your confidence level is at its lowest as you're at this intermediate stage of knowledge, as you sort of start to realize, you start to know all of the things that you start to know that you don't know lots of things. And then as you reach a level of expertise in the field, your confidence increases again. Never quite back to the level of confidence you had as a newbie, but it goes back up again to reconcile with your level of knowledge. So I think about that chart a lot when I think about myself. When I first returned to collecting, which was 9 years ago now, I was just incredibly confident in what I thought was the way to do stuff. And I would like log on to the message boards and be really have strong opinions on what the best Michael Jordan cards were and the right way to do this. And I think one of the theories that I used to have about this is that we are all the kings of our card collecting castle.
Yeah.
In when I'm in class at school, I might just be an average student, or I might not matter at all really, or in my job I might just be somewhere low on the pecking order, and I have all these duties and obligations to my family and to my job and to my friends, and that can all be great, obviously, to be able to have all those things, to have a job or to be a student and to have family and friends. But also, I can quickly start to feel, you know, insignificant and just a cog in a machine. But when we have a hobby like card collecting, I am in total control of that domain. I totally choose and assemble which cards I'm going to collect, which players I'm going to collect, and I choose which communities that I'm going to belong in. And I'm like an entrepreneur too, in the sense that I'm buying and selling cards, and I'm trading cards, and I'm a yeah. Brett from Stacking Slabs sometimes trots out his slogan of "Be the CEO of your collection." I don't think it's a coincidence that term is sticky, that it resonates with people. You are the CEO, you're the boss, you are in charge. Or the metaphor that I was using, you're the king of your castle, of your collecting domain. And I think that's part of the reason why collecting appeals to a lot of us, is that we get to be a CEO or a king of a domain. But the one of the consequences, or the ripple effect of this, is that we're going to have really strong opinions. We're going to be very confident, and we're gonna our ego is going to be in full bloom. And it's also similar being a sports fan too, not just in cards but in sports too. I can pull up a chair and talk to any sports fan, and they are going to have really strong opinions about their favorite team's coach and the star player and which role players they hate and what they think about the owner and stuff. They're going to have really, really strong opinions on that too. I just think there's something about it is a hobby that maybe brings that out of us a bit.
Amazing answer. You never disappoint, man. That was really the chart. There's so many good charts like that out there, but that chart definitely. I'll look it up for sure
Yeah.
and try to
Yeah.
keep it in mind. Will had a question kind of for you about you know uh, in terms of the big markets, obviously, just to bring it back to kind of the global context a bit. US and China are the big drivers, right? US, then China, but China has some serious international heat, as we were talking about earlier, especially in basketball and soccer. Um, you know, do you have any kind of insights from other markets that have kind of piqued your interest and just kind of unique sports scenes or yeah, anything you're kind of seeing out there from specific markets?
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, how exactly? Like, are we talking like, are there like burgeoning basketball card collecting communities in new countries or something like that? Or,
Yeah, things along those lines. Yeah, I
That'd
think
be
so.
interesting. Yeah.
well, I'm not sure how well known it is. I think maybe all of us are aware of it. But the Philippines has a really strong collector community. And for example, the guy who I hold in the highest regard, who I think is the greatest Luka collector in the world, he lives in the Philippines, which might surprise somebody who's not totally plugged into the hobby. So I always watch the Philippines. I watch the collectors from the Philippines. Some of those guys are market makers. And I was first introduced to collectors from the Philippines actually in Michael Jordan collecting. The first great collector from that country that I came to know, and he's one of the best Michael Jordan collectors there that exists, is a guy named Stephen Go, and he taught me a lot too. So the Philippines is one country that just has tastemakers, you might say, or market makers, and some really savvy collectors who have been doing it for a long time. But they're also a bit established. Outside of that, I'm not quite sure. I don't really have my ear to the ground on this as much. Um, I wonder I wonder if Will, did you have something in mind? Is there maybe a place or a
Yeah, I mean,
sport?
just just coming from New Zealand, the card collecting scene there, and I was there for 18 months. So when I first went back, I was just curious to what it was like because I remember it as a child, but as an adult, you're going back, and it just continues to grow. It's crazy. New Zealanders love collecting cards. So do Australians. They're kind of getting on they're on the up and up too. Obviously, you have those cherry collectibles are a big time player, and they're really moving the hobby in Australia too. But thinking about Europe and what's happening in Germany and England as well is pretty impressive. Like John, from what Jamie's told you about the London Card Show, it started with just maybe 13 or 14 tables at the London Card Show, and now they do it every quarter, and it's just a massive event. So I guess those are some up and coming ones. I just wondered if you had any dealings with people around Europe, or you saw some trends with Jokic cards or Luka cards from Europe as well, possibly.
I've seen more Jokic action in Asia than Europe right
Oh wow.
now, just in terms of like who I buy and sell cards from and the location of sellers on eBay and the people I interact with and social media and the Facebook collector groups. A lot of Asia, more so than Europe for Jokic. However, the place where I see Australia and New Zealand dominating is in Michael Jordan cards. they
Really?
those two countries have produced a lot of Michael Jordan collectors, and they have an influence on his market.
Wow.
Uh, and one of the main early Michael Jordan collectors that I discovered once I came back was a guy on Blowout who went by the handle. He got Game 15, I think it was.
All
I'm
right.
pretty sure he's Australian, and he was just was very inspirational. Like the way he collected, um, he had a great taste in picking out the best inserts, and he really knew how to show them off and make them look really cool and fun to collect. He's one example, but if you go on to the Facebook collecting groups or just go on eBay or whatever, I mean, you'll see a lot of Australian people located in Australia who are collecting Michael Jordan cards.
Yeah,
Um,
cool.
I do think that you guys were telling me a bit about the show in Dusseldorf that's coming up this summer. I do think Europe is. I could put it one way. I could say Europe has a lot of catching up to do, or I could say Europe is poised for growth in this area. The thing that the unfair advantage or the unfair disadvantage for Europe is that they didn't really get to grow up with a massive sports card collecting scene the way that some other places did. So they don't have quite as much nostalgia for like 90s cards and stuff like that. So I think they're forging and laying the groundwork for future generations of collecting. They're building that process right now. There may be a generation or two behind, but I do think they're building it. And I mean, Europe would just be an ultimate force if they ever got as enthusiastic about cards as like Asia or North America.
Yeah, this German show, I mean, it's I think it started as like 30 tables 4 years ago, and last summer was 300 tables, and this summer I think is 600. So, the manufacturing heart of Europe is coming. So if anyone can do it, the Germans seem to be on a nice trajectory. Um, I just circling back to you shared something interesting to me in the Jokic chat, I think last night or something from Japan. You want to share it?
The jersey sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, Japanese. I'm not sure who put out the statistic. Somebody associated with the NBA put out a statistic that said that jersey sales in Japan for the past year, Jokic was the second most popular player. The first player was a Japanese player, which
Oh
makes sense.
yeah.
Memphis,
Was it
right?
really?
No, no,
Oh,
it was not Rui. It was yeah, the guy
was
in
it a
Mexico.
kid from Memphis? Yeah, he's fun.
Yes, he is fun. I mean, he's so. I, to be that small, right? Just to put it frankly, to be that small and to
Yeah.
be able to play in the NBA is a feat of athleticism that's unthinkable. Uh,
Agreed. And not like a super athlete like a Nate Robinson either. Just a
no,
regular looking average
just
sized person to the rest of the
and
world or small.
it's amazing. It's like it's a bit like Muggsy Bogues or something like that.
Yeah,
But he
that's
was
right.
first, and then Jokic was second, which I think for I don't think it's totally random. I think Jokic has taken some sponsorship deals and aligned himself with companies that are popular in Asia. So I think he has a bit more marketing behind him that's sort of pushing his popularity in Asia. But I have to imagine that there's also just some sort of natural appeal that he has to to just the Asian sports fan because it also shows up in collecting. And maybe it's all just a function of marketing. That could be, but or maybe they just there's something about him that appeals.
Yeah, I know he has a studio in China, right?
He does, yeah, yeah. Like I don't know much about shoes or anything. 361 is the company or something like that. I want to say.
I don't know. Yeah. Uh, I mean, it is interesting. They like their bigs, I think, enough there. I don't know if that's
Yeah, I mean,
safe to
Shohei's
say.
not a small guy, right? Like
Yeah.
the Otani market, he's a
Or the
big
really
lad.
small ones. They're Japanese.
Well, tiny.
I don't mean to be disparaging in any way, but yeah, it's in these stats are interesting. The market differences are really interesting to me. That's why I bring these up. And Turkey, we're really just trying to grow. But I think slowly but surely maybe it will happen. I mean, but we're having a good time in the meantime. That's for sure.
That's
Well,
right. Yeah,
Shengun,
so
Yeah. No, sorry, go ahead.
Schengen, they love him here. They love him the bits. So John and I went and watched a game of his a couple of years ago when Turkey was, it was the summer they were trying to qualify for the Olympics. Somehow didn't make it, but Schengen was playing, and he was just a cat's whiskers over there, wasn't he, John? Just no one could get even near him, and we had our cards at the stadium ready to go.
Yeah, I
But
mean
before and after the game, there was no chance.
as long as he doesn't get injured, he'll be the best Turkish player ever.
That's right.
And so people are excited about him. Everyone loves him here.
Yeah, I think he could be a big factor in Turkey. I don't know that he'll raise to the level of Dirk, but it wouldn't be out of the question if he ended up meaning to the Turkish basketball scene and community what Dirk has meant to Germany.
Yeah, makes sense. He's likable. He's fun. He's always posting a lot of things that Turkish people appreciate. So I can see him doing that.
It's
There's
cool.
actually even a prospect that I want to kind of share. John, I don't think John knows this, but there's an ex-student of mine actually. I used to teach him when we were in COVID. He never turned up to our online classes. Fair enough. But whenever I mentioned basketball, it was I'm here. His name is Omad Kutluay. He's actually been signed up by Real Madrid, and he's scoring bunches of points right now, and he's only 16, 17 years old, so he probably won't be draft eligible for a couple of years. But his father was an ex-NBA player, so he used to play for the Sonics. His name was Ibrahim Kutluay. So he was probably the first Turkish basketball player out there, and he was an outside player. So he was the Turkish version of Peja Stojakovic. Could just shoot the living daylights out of the ball, So he's one that I'm watching from this part of the world. He's probably the biggest prospect I can see coming up in the next couple of years from Turkey at least. Yeah, something to look out for.
Will, full of surprises, man. I didn't know that story, and
I
I've
kept
I've
that
seen
one
a
from
video
you,
of this
mate.
guy. Yeah, he's on Instagram. I'll say that the prospect. So yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Um,
very cool.
well, Chris, don't want to hold you too long, and really appreciate your time. This was awesome.
agreed.
Thank you for coming on, and yeah, any parting words for those global card collectors out there?
It was my pleasure to join the show. I would love to join the show maybe sometime in the future. Maybe we could all celebrate a Jokic championship sometime
Or a
soon.
Luka one.
I'd take that one too. I would
Yeah.
me,
take either
me
or.
too.
Even Shengun, if you guys want to do
Yeah.
a post
Yeah.
Rockets championship one day. I really appreciate coming on, and I enjoy what you guys are doing, and I hope you keep on pushing onward and upward.
Thanks,
Thanks for
man.
the support, man. Have a good day for on your end.
Take care, guys.